Hi YouTube. So I know I'm a little bit behind, but this will be my last catch-up video. So I'm gonna make it on my pediatric rotations. My pediatric rotation that I completed now 3 weeks ago. So I'm just gonna make one video on this because I think that's really all it needs. And if anyone actually watched my video back almost a year ago updating you on my rotation schedule, you'll notice this is quite changed. Or maybe, no, yeah, I can't remember. But anyways, my pediatric one was not supposed to be during this last time. What had happened is, I think it had been changed like 3 times. First one happened, unfortunately, the preceptor that I was going to be with for a different one ended up passing away, and then my pediatric one was a relative of that, so she took time off, and then I went to, they set me up at a different hospital, but that doctor left that hospital, so then I was kind of in limbo, and I just didn't really have one. But it didn't matter. I mean, this was still quite a few weeks ago. And so I was on my surgery rotation, literally that Wednesday or Thursday, I think it was that Wednesday afternoon, I get a call from my coordinator being like, hey, or a message like, hey, can you please call me back? I have something we need to urgently talk about. So okay. So I called back and they said, oh, we have a pediatric rotation that just opened up starting on Monday. It's going to be kind of in the area where I live, and it's going to be maybe possibly at a bigger hospital, so you'll get to do inpatient and outpatient. And I was like, oh, sweet, that sounds awesome. But it would mean I had to give up my family med rotation that I was really excited about and that John had just completed, and he was, raving about it and how awesome it was. But I don't know, I could pretty much had to take this pediatric rotation. So I did, and then, it was kind of last minute schedule change, but that's okay. I just went with it, and so I didn't really prep that much. I had the weekend, obviously, so I did a little bit of prepping for my pediatric rotation. Quite a bit, change of mindset for me. I like to be prepared and be thinking ahead and all that. But then I showed up my first day and I realized, so most of the other students that are, it's kind of like through our school pediatric rotation, they do 2 weeks of outpatient, 2 weeks of inpatient, or 2 weeks of inpatient and 2 weeks of outpatient. And that sounded cool to me. Usually I'm out in smaller communities, which I really love. But if I was going to be in this larger town or larger city, I think it would have been cool to get to do both of those. And, in the inpatient, you can for sure learn how to do fluid management for pediatrics and, see some of the sicker cases. And if you just do clinics, you're not really getting all of that. But anyways, I showed up my first day excited of outpatient expecting I'll have inpatient. I talked to my doctor and they're like, oh no, I have you for all 4 weeks. And so I'll be honest, I was really bummed. I don't know, just with everything and the change and thinking if I changed my schedule, I'd at least get inpatient experience, and then finding out I wasn't was kind of a bummer for me. So that kind of put me in a bad mood. But I talked to another doctor who was kind of in charge of all of the students that went through our school on that rotation, and he said that I could come to the hospital on Thursday mornings early and go to the newborn nursery with some of the other students, and also rotate around with the students. When I was done with clinic, I could head over to the hospital and spend a few hours there with either the doctor or the nurse practitioner that was there. So that gave me a little extra chance to be at the hospital, which is really great. I like that, just to see the differences and everything. And because at this hospital they have the pediatric hospitalists, and then you have your clinicians that work in the clinic. So the clinic doctors never really went over to the hospital, and the hospitalists, obviously it was shift work, they always were at the hospital. So that's how that was. So I was bummed that I didn't get to, other than the extra stuff I had to ask for. But in all, I don't know if it really mattered. So I was pumped for pediatrics. I always thought I would be a pediatrician. I've loved kids. I've nannied and babysat, and I was that girl at church who was always in the nursery and always holding other people's babies, and just really enjoy that. And I also just really, it's a hobby of mine. I love reading parenting books and just developmental. I took developmental psychology in undergrad, and I just always loved that. So I was really excited to do pediatrics. because I plan in my practice someday to have pediatrics in my family medicine clinic. So as for things we had to learn, we had a set of objectives and everything, and this was our text that was recommended by our school, and it was pretty cool. The first part of it, section, is like general pediatrics, so it has things like nutrition, immunizations, child advocacy, growth, and all that. And then the next section has chief complaints, so that's like cough, fever, sore throat, ear pain, upper respiratory tract infections, abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, rash, trauma, joint and limb problems, and CNS problems. So that way, if you just looked up cough, patients don't usually come in like with pneumonia. They usually come in with cough or fever, and so this kind of helps you figure out how to work it out. And then the last section has like selected topics like cardiology, genetics, nephrology, pediatric neurology, and all that. I didn't get around to reading those last kind of specialty chapters. I wish I could have, I just didn't have time. I read all that, so that's a book that I would read. And then also, again, all my case files, which I love. I'm such a case file learner. And I don't know, I think this really helped me on the test, kind of filled in some gaps, some things I already knew, some things I definitely didn't, so that was helpful. But the main thing we had to do for my school is what's called clip cases, and it's all online. It's like, I don't know, there was like 32 cases, and you click on it, and it took me a good hour to go through each, and like 29, anywhere from like 20 to 30 slides, and it would take you through a case, and you'd ask a question, you'd have to like click on it, and it would like give the patient's answer, and it'd have you answer questions like, okay, what's the new differential diagnosis? So you could pick anywhere from like 0 to however many there were. Anyways, it really took you through a lot of things, like Kawasaki's was on there, and your post-streptococcal glomerular nephritis was on there. So kind of more of the uncommon ones, like I did not come across either of those in my pediatric clinic, but it was pretty much like I at least seen one patient with that because I went through the case. And then the end of rotation exam, since this is a required rotation, there's tests at the end. However, this is not a COMAT exam or equal to like a shelf exam. This was made by our school, and it was pretty much off of the clip cases, they told us. So I did a really good job. I took notes on each clip case, so I don't know if you can see. So each clip case, I took my own notes, because at the end they have PDF files that are like 15 pages long, and I just didn't want to have to do the cases and print those off and then read them and then I don't know, I thought I would make my own little study guide, and it worked well. I did well in the test, so I don't know, that's how I did them. So I just wrote it in pen, and then what I did is I went back, like the morning of or the night before, I went back and I studied and I highlighted some crucial information, or at least that I thought was important. Yeah, so there's a lot of cool cases. And also another thing that I had the opportunity of doing on my rotation, since I was kind of with my school-related group, I think there's 11 of us, or 10 of us, 9 of us in that group at that time, and so one of the main physician who teaches some of our lectures is a hospitalist, and then he kind of heads up this whole pediatric rotation connected with our school. And we meet with him on Tuesdays as a group, and so we had 4 sessions with him, and he'd walk us through a case. And then the first one we just heard about the history and physical, and then we had to take notes. And then the next Tuesday we were supposed to come back and just meet with our group, and we had think of a differential diagnosis, what tests we wanted to run, and kind of like where we wanted to go from there. And so we each had to pick a topic. I won't say it just in case anyone from my school, I think they do it the same every year. So that was kind of cool to see everyone else's ideas and what they were thinking and what stuck out to them as important in the history. And then like the next week we talked about it, and I don't know, I can't remember, somehow it all fit into the 4 weeks. So that was kind of an added perk of that rotation. Talking a little bit more about my experience at the clinic, I was in what I consider a city. I don't know the exact population, but definitely a city. and the main hospital right across the street. We were kind of the clinic attached, not attached to the hospital, but definitely like shared parking lots pretty much. And gosh, there were a lot of pediatricians that worked there. One, two, I mean, I would say like 10. I don't know if that's right or not. So quite a big clinic. I mean, they even had like the well child's waiting room and sick child's waiting room and different colored pods and everything. Much larger than I've ever seen or been in. So that was interesting. My physician had 4 of his own rooms, and he had his own nurse, and then, I don't know, it was kind of a bummer rotation for me. Again, not only did I get switched, and I didn't really get very much inpatient thing like I thought I would, but I also pretty much just shadowed. He didn't want me really to go in and see the patients and do the history and physical and workup and all that. I pretty much followed him, went in with him, and he'd ask questions, and at the end I'd be like, okay, do you have any questions you want to ask them? And then he would do a physical exam, and then he would say like, okay, do you mind if my helper examines your ears or examines you or something? So then I would sometimes get to do that afterwards. And then he would kind of like question me in front of the patient, which I know can be good for your education because, then the patient gets to hear everything. But it also makes me feel a little ridiculous. Like, we had one where the umbilical cord, like, she came in with concerns that it wasn't right, and, she just was really concerned about the umbilical cord falling off. And so afterwards, he examined it, and I examined it, and he's like, okay, well, what do you want to tell her? Does that look normal? Is that not normal? Is this... And that was, like, the first, other than, like, newborn umbilical cord I had ever really examined or looked at, and sure, it looked kind of gross, but don't all umbilical cords kind of look gross? So I have, like, no idea what to say, because I want to say, oh, no, it looks fine, and then him be like, oh, actually, it's not. But I want to be like, oh, no, that's not okay, and scare the mother when it's actually fine. So I kind of it was a lot more stressful than my other rotations with him asking those questions. And sometimes he'd ask questions, and I would think I had the right answer, and he'd be like, oh, well, like, why not this, or why this? And so then I would second guess myself, and I swear, like, the patients would look at me like I was dumb. But, so I didn't really like that part of my rotation either. But I guess if it forced me to learn something, I don't know actually what I got out of it. Looking back, no, I don't think it was great. Other things, I guess, when I go in the room, and since I was pretty much just shadowing, I would just hang out with the kids. And he also has, like, a computer that he has to take all his notes on. You can tell he, like, hates it. And he has to, every time they say, like, okay, how long has the fever been? And he'd have to, like, type it all in. And, okay, wait, when did this start? And then he'd have to go to his computer and, like, type it all in. And then sometimes it would freeze, and then you'd have to wait. And then I'm awkwardly just, like, standing in there. So I kind of gave that up, and I just ended up playing and hanging out with the kids. I played peekaboo. I would read books to them. That kept me entertained. It kept me busy and entertained the kids, especially if he was questioning the mom, because obviously the 2-year-old can't tell you how long their fever has been for. So yeah, I got to hang out with kids. I got to see a lot of ears, and I think I can successfully, diagnose ear infection and strep and whatnot to swab. And so yeah, I gained a lot of, like, clinical good education. Saw a lot of colds. I definitely want to do a lot of education in my clinic because I think it's important for parents. Like, they would come in, my 7-year-old has a sore throat. I think they have strep. Swab them. Yep, nope, not strep. 2 days later, oh my gosh, they have this, or like 4 days later, oh my gosh, they have, like, this really green, runny nose, stuffy. I think they have a sinus infection. Nope, this is just, a normal thing of cold. 3 days later, they're in, oh my gosh, they're coughing. I think they have pneumonia. So I think from day one, you can explain that this most likely is a cold. Here's the progression of what an upper respiratory infection, consists of sore throat, your runny nose, which then actually does turn green and usually more purulent. Doesn't mean it's a sinus infection. That's kind of the normal progression of a cold. And then, yeah, you usually do get a cough lasting anywhere from a few days to even 2 weeks afterwards. So I don't know, I thought it was helpful if you educated parents about that. And then, to sit down and tell them, you know what, it's viral, it'll go away all on its own. You can do symptomatic treatment if you want to, if you're really concerned about the fever. Yeah, you can, and they look really uncomfortable, I guess, you can give ibuprofen and Tylenol, but, you don't necessarily need to. It's not going to make their sickness any shorter. I know we gave out, or we prescribed like Benadryl or Loratadine or like Claritin to help with some of the runny nose and stuff of a cold, which again is just symptomatic. It doesn't necessarily make the cold go away sooner. And same with like cough medicine and cough syrup. If it helps them sleep through the night, if they're coughing and hacking and they're not sleeping at all, I don't know how that's conducive to healing either. So even though the cough syrup doesn't cure them of the cold, it symptomatically helps them. So I don't know, I find that fascinating, and educating patients and having a conversation with them of what they understand. I think I would love, I love clinic work, I love peds, I love the education part. Parenting was fascinating. What I think he did a great job with is, you do a lot of well child checkups, so you ask how they're doing, and usually like around the age of 2, they're like, oh, they're throwing tantrums, they're being defiant, they're, all this stuff. And so then he talked about like, well, what are you doing? Oh yeah, I put them in timeout. Well, how do you do timeout? Oh, I make them sit in a chair for, a minute. Well, what are they doing? Oh, they're screaming and crying and yelling, and I'm yelling, and then after a minute they're done. And so then he talked about kind of research and what they've shown with timeout and how it should be done. And I won't go into it because seriously, the full spiel takes like a half an hour. We did this a lot, so it seriously would take that long. But pretty much, you have timeouts, and you give them. If it's a little thing and you say, okay, you do that again, you go into timeout, and the second time they do it, you have to put them in. Other things like safety issues or just things that they know, like you can't jump on the couch and they know that, then that is an immediate. They go into timeout. And timeout can either be if they're little in their crib or a chair, and they have to sit there, and usually for how old they are, so if it's a 3-year-old, they usually sit there for 3 minutes. However, it has to be 3 minutes of complete silence, because a kid sitting in a chair crying and yelling and calling you bad names and all that stuff, that's trying to get your attention. That's not timeout for them. It's actually the quietness. So it might actually take 3 hours and 3 minutes sitting on that chair for timeout to be done. And you don't pay attention to them. What they want is your attention. Even if it's you yelling at them or you explaining the situation or anything, that kind of means that the child has won. And so put them in timeout, and you don't start the timer until they're quiet. And once they're quiet for 3 minutes, you go over and you ask them, are you ready to be done with timeout? And if they give some sort of like, yep, or I love you, Mom, or something like that, then sure, they can go and be out of timeout. However, if you come back and you say, okay, you're ready to be done with timeout, and no, I hate you, or something like that, then it starts all over again. So, I don't know, I thought that was fascinating, and he said this is like a lot of research topic, and he's found really great success, and parents, really do a good job, because he also saw a lot of child psych, which was interesting. We saw a lot of ADHD, OD, CD kids and everything, and I thought it was really interesting. And so a lot of parents would come to him and be like, oh, my kid is defiant and we need a medication or whatever, and he would start off by, okay, well, let's talk about how you're how punishment works, or how you're teaching them and everything. And so we'd go through that first, and then maybe medication later down the road if it really isn't working. But he really did try to educate the parents and try other ways of parenting before reaching for medication. So a lot of well childs, a lot of colds, some pneumonias. I think actually only 1 or 2. That was probably our worst. A lot of rashes. He was so right. He'd be like, we'd walk in the room and be like, oh, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I brought my dermatologist friend, obviously if we knew it was a rash, and they'd be all excited, oh, really? And I'm like, no, I am not a dermatologist. But, so I got good at like describing rashes, macular papular versus vesicle versus all that. And I saw some ringworm. So that's fun to explain to parents. It's not actually like a worm that lives under there. And so, yeah, I got to do a lot of educating. Again, that's what I love. And in peds, you get to do a lot of educating. And I loved that part of it. Loved the kids. Oh my gosh, my favorite moment was we just saw this little girl, and I probably saw her 3 or 4 times total in my 4 weeks there, either for her or for a sibling or something. And brother was super cute too. He would come up to me, and he was probably only like a year old, and he'd want me to hold him, and his mom's like, oh, that's usually not the case. And he would just kind of cuddle in on me, and his sister, I think, was like 2 or 3, and she was just cute as can be. And I think on like the 3rd time I hung out with them, or maybe it was the last time, they were getting ready to go, and she like clamped onto my leg and was like, "No, I don't want to leave you," and she was crying, and they pretty much had to like pry her off me to go. So that was pretty much a high moment of my pediatric, is I've never had a patient cry when leaving the doctor's office. But again, that's because I pretty much played with them and would do the physical exam and stuff. So yeah, very different rotation. By far not my favorite, just because again, I like my own autonomy. I like being able to go in, do the history, do the physical, talk about things I want to order, what's on my assessment and plan. I like doing that, and since my first rotation, I got to do that, and pretty much the doctor was like, "Come wake me up, you know, when you're all finished," to go to someone and be like, "Okay, I'm just gonna pretty much do everything, and you can be in the room with me." That was hard. That was really hard to just sit there. So I learned as much as I could, and he was a great physician. His patients really seemed to like him. Another thing, though, that drove me crazy is he was like anywhere from a half hour to like 2 hours behind, and I had to stop wearing my watch. I could not handle it. Like, I would show up at 8:45 because we'd start seeing patients at 9, and he wouldn't show up till like 9:45, and oh my gosh, I don't know, it was very anxiety provoking for me to be that behind. So I was like, you know what, it's not my clinic, it's not my patients, I'm just here to learn, so I had to put my watch aside and just deal with it. And so that was hard, but I made it through. So in all your rotations, you learn things that, you know, some physicians do that are awesome. Like, I thought he did a great job on the education and great job with the parenting aspects, and really going into depth on that. And then other things that I would probably do that he wouldn't, is I like to be on time. I understand if you're late due to something else, fine, but I like to, for the majority of times, always be earlier on time. And then another thing is he had his nurse do kind of the checkups of, you know, the different, oh, are they walking yet? Are they sitting? Are they crawling? Or how many words are they saying? And so that he didn't really do that. But I think I actually want to do that myself, because if the parents have any questions, they can ask me, and we can chat about things. So that's something I would like to do different. But yeah, that is my pediatrics rotation. I took the test on the very last day. I did well. I got a 91%, I think, and to high pass I needed an 85. But I also needed, again, it doesn't really matter because I don't think I got like pretty much all 5s on my, I still haven't heard back from him on my evaluation. But yeah, that is how I studied for that. I was glad we had the clip cases because, like I said, I pretty much saw colds and rashes and well checks, and so I didn't see like Kawasaki's or an HIV, mother giving birth, and how to treat that or what to look for and all that. Didn't see, I'm just looking at all the clip cases I did. You know, I wasn't in the ER, so I didn't see any like peds trauma or anything. So yeah, my favorite thing that he did let me do is wart removal. So he actually used like the nitrous oxide, whatever, you know, comes in, you take the little swab and you put it in, it's like all like steamy and stuff. It's really cool because it's freezing cold. And he let me freeze off the warts, which was fun on my end. It's sadly, unfortunately painful. I've had my when I was a kid, my own removed, so I knew how it felt. So I talk him through and say, you know what, I've even had this done, and give him like a little paper towel to squeeze, and so I kind of warn him everything about it. And I don't know, that was my favorite thing that I got to do. So yeah, so pediatrics, that I can't believe is already done. So looking back, I really liked ER, and I really liked peds. I didn't necessarily like my rotation, but I loved the idea of pediatrics and that. I think it would be fun. Oh, I wanted to mention, I can't find it, which scares me, is my Harriet Lane book. I actually bought, I think it was like $70 or $60, the Harriet Lane handbook. And it would have been, I think, more helpful in the hospital, but it was even helpful in clinic because it has all the dosage and all the stuff in the back. And I know I have like Hippocrates, so I can look it up on my phone and stuff, or on my little iTouch. But I really like the Harriet Lane. All the doses were in the back, and I don't know, it just seemed easier and had pictures of different rashes inside. So I would recommend that to anyone who's interested in doing peds or even family medicine or ER, where you could potentially have pediatrics coming in. Definitely a necessity. So I just bought it knowing that I plan to see kids in my residency and then also in my future clinic life. So yeah, that's all. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Update as of now, I am 3 weeks through my internal med rotation, so I'm almost caught up on my videos. I'll make another one next weekend, hopefully, if I have time, talking about my internal med rotation. So yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions. I hope you guys are having a good weekend.